Consider ourselves as the authors of new justice. We have to see ourselves as the authors of a new justice. And wherever we find injustice and tyranny, we must stamp it. We must kill it. Frederick Douglass said the world belongs to the youth. Our job is to seize that and to make the world more humane. That has to be the role of any revolutionary or any person who considers himself revolutionary.
What really transformed you into the person who grabbed national headlines, and with some of the clips that we heard that we ran at the beginning of the program, what moved you to that position?
I think we're always products of our time, and as to the coming together of certain events and ability more than anything else, I guess would contribute to any person being recognized.
I say violence is necessary. Violence is a part of America's culture. It is as American as cherry pie. American taught the black people to be violent. We will use that violence to rid ourselves of oppression if necessary. We will be free by any means necessary.
There has been no successful example of democracy as it's taught in this country. I'm not even talking about as it's practiced. I'm talking about as it's taught in this country.
How about the Constitution?
Looks good on paper. I think, the Constitution has a lot of valid ideas and thoughts. But you see that the contradictions that exist in this country are created out of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Otherwise, Constitution is nothing but white people's paper.
When black people begin to rebel, and you call it riots, we understand that those are not riots, those are rebellions. People are rebelling because of conditions and not because of individuals. No individual creates a rebellion. It's created out of the conditions.
Tell them to shoot at Lady Bird.
I say if they give me a gun and tell me to shoot my enemy, I might shoot you.
400 years she taught you white nationalism and you lapped it up. You taught it to your children. You had your children thinking that everything black was bad. Black cows don't give good milk. Black hens don't lay eggs. Black for funerals, white for weddings. That's white nationalism. Santa Claus. A white honky who slides down a black chimney and comes out white.
No, justice ain't blind. Justice see white folks mighty well. As a matter of fact, justice means just us white folks in this country. See, for black people, justice is a joke. No such thing as justice in this country for black people. The courts are a tool of oppression. The courts, help to execute the genocide, the type of genocide that has been practiced against black people in this country for 400 years.
I walked out of the cell, two big animal-like, blue-eyed, pale devils come up and grab me on the arm and tell me I'm under arrest. However, I know more of their law than they do. I knew I was in a federal building. I don't know the honk. If you see one, you see them all.
Get off me, man! Just try to pop off of me!
Wait a minute. Let me go, brother. Let me go, brother. This is federal property. Okay, I'm under. Let me go.
Did you ever get any pressure to stop this foolishness and going back to school and quote-unquote make something of yourself?
From whom now?
Anybody.
Oh yeah, there was always a constant pressure of the older people, of parent and older people who felt that this was not necessarily the way to deal with the problems that were at hand. But again, the level of commitment that most of the people, the youngsters, had at that time was of such that they were willing to sacrifice. Again, we began to see the educational process as being no more than a training process to keep people enslaved. And ultimately, we began to view the political process in that manner as well.
As we're talking about Democratic and Republican Party, that's not the case. See, politics concerns everything that you do. Everything that happens in your life is political. The real question is, whose political end does it serve? If it does not serve your political end, then it is not beneficial for you to be political in that fashion.
So where do black people fit into the political spectrum right now? Or should they at all?
Well, politics as defined by the geographical and influential spheres of this country It's irrelevant to black people, and it's irrelevant to the masses of people. The vote has been used as a tool of oppression against black people. I mean, Camus raises a very good point when he says, what better way to enslave a man than give him the vote and call him free? See, it does not profit black people or poor people anything to have the vote and not be able to select the candidates who they want to choose. Now, how can you choose between Lyndon Johnson, Nixon, Agnew, Wallace, and Humphrey? There is no choice. Evil is evil. There's nothing in between that.
We tend to equate progress with concessions. We can no longer make that mistake. You see, when they gave us that nigger astronaut, you said we were making progress, but I told you they were going to lose him in space. He didn't get that far. You put Adam Clayton Powell in office and you couldn't keep him. What you think they're going to do with Thurgood Marshall when they get tired of him? They gave you Walter Washington of Washington, D.C., and you said we were making progress. That's not progress. See, it's no in-between. You're either free or you're a slave. There's no such thing as second-class citizenship. That's like telling me you can be a little bit pregnant.
Again, when you begin to understand the whole system of education in this country, see, whatever you don't control can be used as a weapon against you. Anything that you don't control can be used as a weapon against you. Education has been used as a weapon against black people because black people have been trained to think a certain way. See, we do not control politics, so politics as it's known in this country is a weapon against black people. And we begin to examine what politics is, we find out it's no more than the apex of white cultural aggression. Nothing more. When a man tells you that you can only become free through voting, then he is restricting your mobility. He's restricting your freedom. You were born free. You must exercise your rights to be free. See, that man cannot give you freedom. But when he restricts an individual and tells him that he can only become free by voting, then he has denied you your freedoms.
Dick Gregory running for office, Eldridge Cleaver.
I think the vote can only be used as a tool of organization. We can only use the vote to organize our people. Now, to really believe that we can put someone in office and that these people would be responsive to our needs, it's naive, politically naive. Because even if one of the black candidates who ran for office was to take the office of president, then black people must be prepared to fight against that person.
Why?
Because, you see, the system mandates the action of the individual. The individual does not determine how this country will function. This country works off the military-industrial complex, which means that it's profitable to wage war. And unless you devise another plan, another scheme to sustain, to boost this economy, then it's going to be necessary to wage war. Whether, a black individual is in office or a white individual is in office. Well, so we're talking about a complete a change in system.
When oppressed people begin to evaluate politics, we must understand that we have to create a politics that's relevant to us. We must create a politics that's relevant to our lifestyle. We must create a politics that's relevant to what we do every day. So when we talk about politics, when we talk about the political reality of the black community, we are talking about something that's beyond Democratic and Republican Party. And in that sense, we must understand that we must incorporate a revolutionary ideology that pushes this type of political know-how and political knowledge in the black community.
If you were well reared to be, seen and not heard, respectful and all of that, where did this spine come from? And what was the reaction on the part of your parents when they saw your shoulders beginning to square and your spine beginning to straighten?
Again, the Creator has placed within every person a kind of understanding of what is natural. He says, men are created with the inclination to do what's natural. It's not natural for people to be enslaved. But again, even in the environment that tries to make this acceptable to you, you still have some resistance to it. And so this coupled with the fact that the movement was gaining momentum, in the 50s and the 60s. And so through media, you know, we saw images of people who were resisting.
Are you under arrest?
I am supposedly free. However, it's a shaky freedom because I'm standing on America's territory right here. That's the only thing that's keeping the racist honky cops out there from coming up here, because I'm supposed to be on federal grounds, whatever that means.
What happens next? What are you going to do when you leave federal ground?
Well, I'm going to stay here on the steps. I'm going to build a house right here. I don't want 40 acres. Yeah, I don't want 40 acres and a mule. I just want some lumber. I'm going to build a house.
I think a lot of times we've overemphasized the role of the gun in revolutionary struggle. A revolutionary is not only the person who shoots a gun. A revolutionary functions in the struggle on whatever level he happens to be. See, there's something that's going on out at the IBM plant. Somebody's out there sabotaging the machines. They don't know who it is. Could be Leroy 00 Soul Buckwheat Johnson Jr. They don't know what's going on, but they know that their machines are breaking down. He's committing a revolutionary act against that company. So wherever you exist, you can exist in a revolutionary fashion if you are committed to revolutionary struggle. See, it's no longer adequate for us to say that we're going to have revolution by any means necessary. You have to begin to define the means that are necessary. You can't say struggle by any means necessary, because again, you're allowing cats to do their own thing. You allow a cat to say, well, you know, I'm fighting the revolution in this way, Jack. I'm going to get some of the mad money. And that's how I'm fighting the revolution. You must lay down guidelines for revolutionary struggle. And to do that, you must have a revolutionary ideology. People have to understand that in terms of ideology, ideology is shaped as a result of struggle. You don't just sit up one night and come up with the correct ideology. That ideology happens as a result of struggle.
The only politics in this country that's relevant to black people today is the politics of revolution. None other. The only thing that's going to free Huey is gunpowder, black powder. When black people become serious about the revolutionary struggle that they are caught up in, whether they recognize it or not, when they begin to go down and knock off people who are oppressing them and begin to render these people impotent, that's when the revolutionary struggle unfolds. Not until we are fighting enemies of the people. They tell you your problem is unemployment. Well, I got a program that can employ every black person in this country overnight.
Politics. Now, there are definitions of politics that are relevant to black people. Chairman Mao says that politics is war without bloodshed, and war is an extension of politics. I think black people have to begin to address themselves to the politics of revolution, because we are caught up in revolutionary struggle, whether we want to believe it or whether we want to be or not. So I think, black people have to begin to think in a revolutionary fashion and create and construct a politically revolutionary platform.
The people became, but we as individuals, we as black people hold the key to liberation of people around the world. See, if people in Vietnam were to become free tomorrow, that would not affect the freedom of people in North Korea. That would not affect the freedom of people in Puerto Rico. See, it's just like an octopus, you cut off its tentacles. You still got tentacles in other places. But if black people see themselves as being a colony in the eye of the monster, we got his brain. You destroy his brain, and you freed Vietnam, you freed Africa, you freed Rhodesia, you freed Latin America. Because this man is the chief oppressor of mankind. You have to understand that in terms of his wealth is made through the oppression of people around the world. So when we talk about replacing the man, when we talk about an ideology that's limited in scope, that does not talk about destroying the system, a system that demands exploitation, then we are talking about replacing the man. Whenever we talk about, well, I don't want to destroy, this country, then you're talking about replacing. See, I'm as much against a black cat oppressing people around the world as I am a white cat oppressing people around the world. wouldn't make me any difference. I would struggle just as hard against a black cat who oppressed black people, because it would be necessary to oppress some people in this country if you took the seats. If all the white folks in the world would have died and black folks moved in on in the seats and assumed those positions and business went on as usual, then Vietnam would continue. Rhodesia would still be imprisoned and oppressed. And it would be because of the economic pursuits of this country. The only way that this country can stay wealthy is that it oppresses people. Capitalism demands exploitation in some form of other people. So when we're talking about creating an ideology, we have to talk about the ideology that's free from that type of economic oppression and physical oppression, because the physical oppression comes as a result of that economic pursuit. So we have to talk about, we have to begin to examine, we can't be immune. We have to examine all ideologies. We just can't be immune because the man says, well, that's communism. Or that's socialism. You shouldn't talk about that. See, this is the role of the student. You have to begin to articulate that. And I'm not saying that, you take a struggle and bring it over here intact. I'm not saying that. Because you cannot import and export revolution. What I'm saying is begin to examine the concepts of socialism. Understand what the man means when he says that the entire wealth of the world belongs to all people, which again goes back to what American politics is not based upon, because American politics is based upon property and land, and a question that has to be raised at this point is, how can you own land? See, if white folks could figure out how to bottle air, they'll do it to make profit off of it. If they could figure out how to bottle air, they would bottle air. They could figure out how, to measure water in cubics and issue out water every day, they would do that. Because they can make profit off of that. So you have to understand that how in the world can people, talk about owning land, water, and air, because land is just like water and air in that sense.
That aggression that's being directed against the Vietnamese people will be turned inwardly against black people in this country. See, America, in terms of where she goes and who she controls, the whole sphere of influence is diminishing. America is fighting on about 5 or 6 different fronts right now. Latin America, like Africa, Middle East, and Vietnam, and here domestically. So I think that, given the system and given that it operates off the military-industrial complex, which means that war is profitable, and that General Steel, USS Steel, must make steel for tanks to hire people, to give people jobs, so they can spend the money to buy other goods. The very fact that the system operates off that principle means that when the man comes back, when the man is run out of every country, then it will become necessary to wage war in his own country.
It's the whole rule of divide and conquer. Whereas America, the patriots of America do not exist as individuals. In reality, white people in this country do not exist as individuals. See, the police have a line talking about, well, we are a minority too. That's not true, because they reflect the attitude of the majority of the people in this country. And white people, the white people who are racist, the white people, who are capitalists and who oppress people, they reflect the attitude of the majority in this country. So they do not exist as individuals. So black people have to understand that whole thing of individualism is a luxury that we can ill afford. We cannot afford to be individuals in this country.
Was all of that struggle, all of that pain that you went through, when you look at today, was it worth it?
Well, I think our analysis of struggle has to be of such that it's an ongoing process. See, if our analysis of struggle is that it began in the 50s, we could reason that it ended in the 60s, which is not the case. When the first African rebelled against being enslaved, he gave an alternative to slavery that has been built upon even until now. What we saw in the 50s and the 60s was movement. And there had been many movements before. There had been the abolitionist movement, the anti-slavery movement, the Niagara movement, the civil rights movement, the free speech movement. There have been movements that visit struggle. But struggle is an ongoing process. So even today, we are in the midst of struggle. Again, struggle is at a different level than it was at that particular time.
What do you see today?
Again, there are more components, who are aligned to participate in struggle today than there were in the 60s.
You don't see anything analogous to the Panther Party or SNCC today?
Well, those organizations serve their purpose, but there are organizations that will come into being who will be activists, and the activism will be similar and more intense in many instances, because we have to understand that SNCC evolved into a point, and then the Panthers became a reality. But the Panthers was not the final organization. After the Panthers, there was the BLA. So again, you know, that whole sense of involvement, and what happened in terms of the BLA is that the population, the base, there was no real base to sustain military action. But what do we see happening today? You see, in terms of, there is a kind of attitude amongst the young people today that is militaristic. You have people, and although the energy is misdirected and many people may put it down in terms of the fratricide that's going on, how else do you train an army in this country?
So you view what you see happening in the urban centers as constructive and positive?
It's not constructive or positive, but again, it is something that always is the prelude to armed struggle in any country. That has always been the case.
We created other people to be spokesmen. See, people have to get out of the idea that individuals lead movements. You see, the revolutionary is the individual who's on the other side of that camera. These are the people who will make the revolution. They have responsibilities to the revolution and to themselves. And, you know, like, if individuals articulate positions, it's perhaps because they have public forums, not because they know more than anybody else, not because they are more oppressed than anybody else. So black people have to begin to understand the role that they have to play in that revolution is determined by them.
It is this sense of struggle that we left the 60s with, and we continued with an awareness that struggle has not stopped. It didn't begin in the 50s and end in the 70s. If our analysis of struggle is that it began in the 50s and ended in the 70s, then there is a total failure of closure on the part of our struggle that we are involved in. Again, note the movement sense of struggle, which has always visited struggle. This is that the anti-slavery movement, Marcus Garvey movement, the Black Power movement, Civil Rights movement, they come and they go. But the struggle is continuous until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has righted the wrong that has come about. Again, may Allah be pleased with the effort that has been put forth by all of the people who struggled here.
So now I really am going to end. Because, wait. And in ending, I'm going to end in the Swahili saying, it says, Lasima Tusinda Bila Shaka, which means we shall conquer without a doubt. Black power.